All right, I think we're about ready to kick things off. So, just a brief introduction. I want to welcome everybody to an introduction to post-harvest automation. Thanks for joining us. We really do have a good session for you today. I think it's going to be really interesting for everybody, whether you're just dipping your toes in automation or you're a lot further along the line. Joining Brett and AJ, we're really lucky and excited to have Kevin Ahasi, CEO of Cannabis in Oakland. Kevin, would you mind giving us a brief bio and maybe a bit more info on what you do and what Cannabis is all about?
So yeah, I'm CEO, founder of Cannabis. We're a vertically integrated company based out of Oakland. We have a dispensary on Telegraph Avenue, and then we have a 5-acre campus with 90,000 square feet of industrial warehouse that we own in East Oakland. And there we have currently have 8 1,200 square foot grow rooms going. So we harvest about every 8 days. And we've been using the Mobius, 2 of the Mobius buckers, and then the Mobius 1080S as well.
And your business has a focus that is a little bit different from most other cannabis businesses, isn't that right? In terms of who you employ and how you do things there.
Yeah, so we have embraced Oakland's social equity program and platform, and so we currently hire 50% formerly incarcerated, and buy 50% of the product that we sell at our dispensary from social equity businesses, specifically distribution companies. And as a company overall, we're about 82% either women, LGBTQ, or people of color. So we're really proud of that, having that statistic.
Yeah, that's really impressive. Definitely something to be proud of. Thanks again for joining us. I think we're pretty much ready to go. So I'm going to pass it over to Brett and AJ to kick things off.
Howdy guys, I'm Brett Lane. I'm Manager of Technical Sales and Support here at Eros Technologies. And this is my colleague, AJ.
Hi there, I'm the Director of Strategy and Business Development here. My full name is Amanda James, but any of you on the webinar today, you probably know me as AJ.
And just real quick, thanks a million, Kevin, for stepping up. We had a different guest lined up, and unfortunately something came up. He couldn't make it, and Kevin stepped up in like literally the last, 18 hours or so. So big props and appreciation to Kevin for bailing us out, frankly. Thanks a million, Kevin.
It's the least. You guys have been great to work with.
Right on. Okay, so what we're going to be covering today, an introduction, the move towards automation. And there's a few topics we're going to cover. Equipment overview, process flow, staffing, and how to get started with automation. And we'll be having some Q&A after each of these segments, and then a big Q&A at the very end to wrap things up. So to kick things off, I'd just like to talk for a moment about increasing automation in our industry and what's driving people to move towards automation in the cannabis and hemp industry. So we've identified a few points here, and I'll get Kevin to chime in if there's others that we've missed or what have you. But number one for us is commoditization of us as an agricultural product. As cannabis and hemp become a mainstream commodity, that's driving the necessity and the desire to incorporate more traditional industrial methodologies in processing. We get some pushback on that in terms of people that are quite craft oriented. Their passion is cannabis, always has been, etc. And what we like to equate that to, or at least I do, maybe you'll agree or disagree with me, is if you take something like Scotch as an example, you can buy, sky's the limit on the price of a bottle of Scotch. But at the end of the day, every liquor establishment you go into has Johnny Walker in the rack, and very few of them have that high-end thing. So as everybody starts out wanting to be the top bottle of Scotch in the cannabis industry, but frankly, there isn't room for everybody, and only a few are going to be that player. All the rest are going to have to find somewhere into that greater commoditization, and that's a big driver towards automation.
Sorry, Jonathan, can you just advance the slide one more, please? Thanks.
Perfect. Second is a push towards a hands-off approach in manufacturing, and there's a couple of things that have driven awareness here. One is the pharmaceutical aspect. Cannabis, of course, got into the legal market as a pharmaceutical medicinal product. So no reason why it shouldn't be following standard pharmaceutical practices in general. And of course, the big elephant in the room, COVID, the awareness of just frankly keeping humans out of your consumables. So we found that to be a real big driver. Labor shortages, massive driver as COVID hit again. People frankly couldn't get a labor force to report to work, and if they did, it was sketchy, et cetera, et cetera. So that's a major driver. The need to manufacture consistent product at volume. And this probably dovetails in with the commoditization, but no matter how effective your hand trimming crew is, they're not going to be able to pump out 8-hour shifts, 16-hour shifts, day in, day out, producing thousands of pounds or kilograms of product and do so consistently. And that's where machinery really, really shines. The last point that we've identified is the proven ability to positively brand other automated agricultural products. And my colleague Dana pointed out a great one to me by way of example is the vine ripened tomato thing. As soon as there's a blush of color on that vine ripened tomato, they can snip once instead of snipping each individual fruit off and market it as vine ripened. And they're saving labor costs. They're able to introduce automation, and through smart marketing, they're able to sell that to the consumer as a superior product. Kevin, would you say that what would you say would be your primary driver or one or two reasons for automation in your operation?
It started out of necessity. We had last year had a COVID outbreak and in our trim room, and so we lost our entire trim crew when we had quite a few harvests coming down, and so I frantically started searching the web looking for trimmers that were better than the ones that I had seen in the past. And I think I got really lucky, to be honest. I found you guys. We're in Oakland. There happened to be a unit available in Sacramento at a distribution center up there. So I got in the pickup, drove up there, picked it up, and we were rocking. And when I got back, I was just really amazed from unboxing to the performance of the machine. I was amazed at how superior it was to the other trim machines that I had seen out there. And so since that time, it's really become a part of our practice, and it's allowed us to keep our trim crew numbers significantly lower than they were in the past, which keeps costs significantly lower. We still finish by hand, but the amount of work that the machine does on the front end and that saves our trim team is incredible. So I couldn't recommend the product highly enough. It's saved us a lot of cash, and really, more importantly, got the harvests out of our warehouse as fast as possible.
Sweet. And you just touched on something that speaks to the last point on this deck here, Kevin, is the ability to positively brand. So you still have, despite reducing your labor cost by a massive percentage, you can still accurately and truly claim hand polished product.
Yeah, no doubt. And it just depends, it's so configurable, whether you're dealing with the hydraulics or, the vacuum or, or the blades or whatever it may be. You can give some of the buds, if they're really nice and frosty, you just give them a brush through, and even that light brush expedites the process so much when it comes to the trim crew.
Right on. Cool. I think we'll move from there to the equipment overview. AJ?
Sure. Thank you. So today there's a couple of terms that you're going to hear throughout, so I thought I'd start out just by sort of defining what we mean here. So we use the term processing, or if you're Canadian like us, you can say processing, and I know my American friends always get a kick out of it when we say processing. So there's processing, there's manufacturing, post-harvest operations. We've been into a lot of different operations, and for the purposes of today's presentation, we're going to consider those terms interchangeable. So you may have certain terminology you use, but essentially what we're talking about today is anything that is taking place after the initial chop has happened. So Jonathan, if I can get you to advance to the next slide here. So when we say the chop, meaning it's taking it out of whatever the grow environment is, whether that's a greenhouse, indoor grow room, outdoor field, whatever it is, anything that's happening after the chop and taking it on its way to the form that it takes as an end product. So when we're looking at this processing or manufacturing equipment, regardless of whether you're processing wet or dry, there are certain pieces of equipment that you use along the way, or everything on this page could be carried out by hand. So this is where the choice comes in. Where do you go and pick out certain pieces of equipment to begin your automation journey there? So from the perspective of drying, I'm not going to touch too much on that. There are a lot of there's a lot of passion around the drying and the curing process. So I'll kind of leave that alone. But when it comes to then handling the product, either wet or dry, of course, you've got the deleafing that takes place, and that can happen at a number of different stages, before bucking, before trimming, during trimming. Then you've got the bucking, so taking things off the stalk. Your trimming process, you might be sorting for size, and there's a variety of reasons why you might be doing that. You've got the quality control that's taking place at this point for a number of different reasons. You might be looking for mold. You might be looking for the trim quality at this point. You've got potentially keep separation and sifting out of your product. So those are all the things that are listed out there in that very first box. And there are different pieces of equipment that it can achieve each one of those steps as an alternative to a hands-on approach there. So from there, then you're going to move it over. If you're talking about smokable flower, you're basically going to packaging at that point. And again, manual or automated options for packaging. Or a lot of places now are devoting more and more of their bandwidth for their manufacturing processes to further processing there. So you're talking about moving it forward for extraction, making pre-rolls, things like that. Some people are pressing it. So there's all kinds of different equipment out there for you that doesn't just involve doing everything by hand. So we've included in here a couple of sketches, and Brett's going to point those out on the next page, and that's going to kind of show some of the different pieces of equipment. So Kevin, so far, he's mentioned that right now he's using automated bucking and trimming machines. Kevin, are there other things that are on this equipment overview where you've automated your processes there?
Let's see.
Or perhaps what's on your wish list?
Yes.
Yeah, I think
what are you going to put in place next?
You know, it's funny when you guys were talking. I was saying, "Gosh, I wonder if they have a sorter." That's really that's
yes, we do.
Yeah, we need a sorter. The bucking machine's great. It's by far the best bucking machine that we've used. I think, especially with it breaking down the stems, is super helpful. It's really easy to clean. Again, just really well engineered. So we use bucking and trimming for the most part, and we're in the market for a sorting machine.
All right.
We'll follow up with you.
Yeah. Jonathan, we got any questions from?
We did, and it was exactly the one that Kevin just answered for us. So I think
there we go. Right on.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, if we don't have any more questions there, I can move on to process flow. Sound good?
Yeah, sounds good.
Right on. So process flow is something that you really got to consider. For a lot of people considering automation for the first time, there's all kinds of variables that you maybe don't think about, you don't kind of consider as necessary, or just don't even know what you don't know, sort of thing. So there's a few things about process flow that we'd like to just really highlight and get people to start thinking about as they move towards either automation as a first step or greater automation throughout their processes. The first thing is to make sure that you have adequate space and power supply for the equipment that you intend to purchase. Very often we've shown up to demos and that, and even prepping the host with what power requirements there are it doesn't exist when we get there. And unfortunately, that happens sometimes when somebody takes possession of their equipment for the first time as well. Where it makes sense, do your best to connect your equipment with conveyors. Conveyors obviously are a staple in automation. They're probably, if you were to ask anyone in an industrial anything, what's the first step in automating any process, it's probably going to be conveyors. So we get asked quite a bit if we deem conveyors to be important. And yes, we do. We think it's a critical piece to automating. And again, towards that consistency over volume piece is where conveyors really, really shine. Provide ample space for product and people to enter and exit the room. So when you're planning out your facility, so I'm going to jump right to the bottom here. If we've learned anything, if we've learned nothing else, it's that you always need more space than you think. So just keep that in mind on each one of these points as we go through. Getting product in and out of the room efficiently, not stumbling over it, not creating bottlenecks or safety issues of blocking exits, et cetera, is a prime consideration. Consider what other implements, tools, et cetera, you're going to need in the room. Do you need tables? Do you need a scale to weigh in, weigh out for reporting purposes? Chairs for people on the QC line, recording station. Maybe a laptop computer belongs in that room. Maybe it doesn't. But depending on what your processes, SOPs, et cetera, call for, make sure that you consider each and everything that you're going to need to place in that room and give it the room it needs. Staging and buffer space. Buffer space, I think, was the Dana's term.
Yeah, for a place you've got your product that's been taken down, so the chop has happened, and you're not stuffing it all through your processing equipment all at once. So where are you taking those totes as they are getting prepared out of your grow room, your greenhouse, the field?
Yeah, and I suppose that's particularly important when you're talking about like a field, you get transitioning into your processing facility. And AJ pointed out a great point yesterday about that instance in particular where you're sun grown. So you're, in a lot of these regions, California, et cetera, you're grown at 100 degrees or whatever it is. And the ability to stage that product in a cooler environment, cool the product down so that it's going to shed less resin, et cetera, as it hits your processing equipment is a really great consideration and just will contribute to the overall quality of your finished product. Overall circulation space, so that's we've got downloadable CAD files on our computer or on our website that you can just plug and play into the room. But don't forget, just because the machine fits there doesn't mean the operators do. So you need plenty of circulation space. But you might go so far as taking a roll of masking tape and masking things out on a floor and calling a couple of colleagues together and just, kind of mimicking what you would do every day.
Have some beers in the room while you're practicing, making sure there's enough space.
We never have beers in the room while we do stuff around here.
I'm pretty sure on Cinco de Mayo, we had some chiladas floating down our outfeed conveyor on the Mobius line.
Yeah, that might have been. There's no proof.
There is video proof.
Have plenty of empty totes on hand. Totes are the vehicle that all of the product either arrives or departs in. And it's surprising how often we go to a facility and they own the totes, but they're a quarter mile down the hallway in some other storage facility. So have them on hand. Make sure again you've got room to stack up the totes you're going to need for the next several hours of processing. And on the topic of full totes. When people get into automation, very often they are blindsided by the volume that's actually being processed per minute, per 5 minutes, per 15 minutes, per hour, et cetera. So every time we try to prepare people and say, it's a good idea to have maybe 6 big totes bucked, ready to go through the trimmer, et cetera. And again, I can't tell you how many times have you shown up to a facility and they've got an ice cream pail of product and say, okay, we're ready to try it out.
We're ready to automate.
And we're like, no, you're not. that's not even nearly ready to go. So make sure that you're planning your processes so that you've got those full totes ready to go, or you're just going to be looking at downtime and you're not gaining the efficiencies that you really ought to out of automation. Set up your equipment ergonomically. So you shouldn't be bending at the waist every 20 seconds to grab more product. that gets old after, 20 minutes, let alone 8 hours. So keep that in mind. And again, that kind of dovetails with what other infrastructure equipment do you need in the room. Maybe a table to set your tote on behind the conveyor, so it's easy to feed the conveyor without it being a whole gymnastics routine.
Yeah.
And the last point I want to talk about here is one that is overlooked unbelievably, is your wash bay. Make sure that you have adequate and proper wash facility for your equipment. When previous you had hand shears and maybe a tray to deal with, you have to consider now that you've got, expensive, high dollar, high value machinery that you've invested a lot of money into. And a lot of times the shortcoming there is the ability to wash it and give it its preventative maintenance that it deserves and that it needs to serve you faithfully for years. So those are the big considerations in process flow that we've identified.
I'm reminded, Brett, actually of one of the very first sites that you and I visited. And this particular site, it was a brand new purpose-built facility, indoor grow, beautiful, beautiful facility. The investors were very keen on maximizing what was going on there. They were willing to put all of the dollars needed into it. So when they got the plans, what they wanted to do was sacrifice one of the areas that had been set aside for processing and for washing, and turn it into another grow room, because they thought that would be bringing in, netting more profits over time. What they weren't understanding is that just because you can grow more doesn't mean that you can actually get more finished product out to the end user. And if they had gone down that pathway, luckily their manager for the site knew enough to push back and say, we can't do that, because if they had done that, they would have created a bottleneck, being able to get less product out the door, and they would have been stuck without the ability to clean their equipment, really messing things up for them. So before you think that everything is driven by the square footage that you have or the acreage that you have for growing, recognize that it really, in most circumstances, is driven by what you can actually put out the door as an end product, not what you can grow.
For sure. So, Kevin, what sort of learning curve, lessons learned when you started down the path of automation out of necessity? What sort of speed bumps did you kind of go, oh goodness, I'm going to need to, create square footage here or what have you? What can you speak to there?
Yeah, pretty much everything on your list is wrong. So we weren't too bad, but the room had to double in size when we got down to it. We ended up putting some 3x6 racking in there, and we had a tall room, so going up, and that's where we store all of our parts, all of our totes. And make sure that we're lining all the totes. So the more space, the better. And then obviously you got to think about the equipment that you do bring in there, the accessories like tables and whatnot. They really need to be on wheels, because everything needs to be moved so that you can clean the room. That's the most important. Yeah, because you are going to get a lot of those, a lot of that sticky stuff in the air and on the ground. Yeah.
Casters are your friend.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. And for anybody who's looking for this type of equipment, AJ's, I think, best friend is Uline. We've got links on our website to specific Uline racks, products, tables, etc., that we find handy. But by all means, hit up Uline's website, and their customer services next world.
I'm tempted to launch into evangelizing on the virtues of Uline and their customer service right now.
But bottom line is, don't go, well, where the heck am I going to get this equipment? Uline.com, that's where you're going to get it.
Yeah.
Awesome. Any questions?
Oh, we have some examples here.
Oh, sure. Yeah. So Jonathan, there you go. So there's a few layout drawings, measured drawings. Again, this is the stuff that's available through us, through our website, etc. But measured drawings that show you the equipment in various configurations. So what's on screen now is what we call a tandem line, in-feed conveyor, 2 Mobius trimmers, out-feed conveyor. That's feeding our auto feed, which is the brand new M9 product, our M9 sorter at the far left, and the auto feed directly preceding it, feeding into it. So that's what that configuration would look like in a straight line, linear, and that's 32 feet required in that configuration. We have other diagrams showing it in an L shape, in a U shape, etc. So you can really utilize measured drawings to lay things out again in your room as you're planning things, whether it's a pre-built room or whether you're looking to build out a new facility. So lean on your equipment manufacturer for measured drawings, etc., to lay out your process flow and really have a good handle on how much of the room it's going to fill when you uncrate it.
So I think the point in showing these is just that you have options for fitting stuff into your space. And we're always here to talk to you, to work with you on figuring out, okay, is there a creative way that we can make this work? I've got these space limitations. So an example of that would be conveyors can come in all kinds of lengths and that. So the ones that we're showing in these diagrams happen to be 6 feet in length. I've had a couple of situations where they didn't quite have that kind of length. So what we did was a shorter conveyor set at 90 degrees that was maybe 3 feet long, and it was water falling onto a very short in-feed conveyor so that they were still able to use that automation on the in-feed, but dealing with the limitations that they had in the room. And this is where, if you do have space limitations, we're going to talk about this in the last section, but it is going to come down to some choices. So it's about weighing your options then and figuring out where you are going to get the most bang for your buck with your automation investment.
Would now be a good time to do a couple questions?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So we have one from Kim, and she was asking if she's doing field grown product, what would be a good temperature for the product to be at before processing, and how much does that impact what we're talking about here?
The answer is always the cooler, the better. So keep in mind, and I would say that this is not specific to Mobius equipment or anything like that. All of your equipment really is going to run in a very, very broad temperature range. Most of it can operate in temperatures that are freezing, and then all the way up to relatively high temperatures. So what we're talking about here is bringing the temperature down for the sake of the plant material. So I know one location that we work with, they're a very, very large greenhouse facility. They've done wet and dry. They're 2 million square feet. So when they would take down one of their greenhouses, which is, a double football field size, they would bring that into a room. They would take that room down to, I want to say that, were they aiming for 14 degrees Celsius, something like that?
I thought it was about 6.
Okay, well,
if we're thinking of the same place.
Yeah, so I'm thinking if we're talking about in Fahrenheit, they were bringing it down into maybe the 50s in that staging or the buffer space. So they're bringing the material temperature down. Then they, when they were ready for it, they would bring it into their bucking and their trimming room. Now the bucking trimming room, they were able to maintain a temperature in there of, call it 65 degrees, maybe 18 degrees Celsius. And with the plant material being cool and the actual processing space being fairly cool, it helped manage the resin buildup and just the condition of the plant material itself, ensuring that it wasn't composting on itself. So really the shorter answer is the cooler, the better.
Got it. Okay. And this question I think could be maybe answered by any of you, but especially Kevin. What about a washing room? Like, would you recommend having a completely separate room for cleaning the equipment, or can you make do with one room for everything?
You can make do with one room for everything. I think in a perfect world, I would have an outside kind of cinder blocked off area with a corrugated roof or something that I could, really spray things down with a hot water heater on it, like you guys recommend. That's not we didn't have that luxury. So, You can do it. It's really process oriented and organizational driven. Putting the totes in the right place, getting, having all of the space to dismantle the machine and clean it properly, making sure that you have the right air circulation happening when you're using the chemicals that you are. So, which we have a lot of inline fans going out of the roof when this is happening. So you can make it happen, but if I had to do it over again, I would plan much better for processing. I would have made the room twice as big initially, and I would have had a completely separate wash area.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah, I'd echo your sentiments there, Kevin, especially on managing the airflow. So it's not just while you're using the cleaners, the chemicals for the cleaning, but you just need to manage humidity in there overall. You need the equipment to dry after the fact. So if you're operating in Las Vegas or Phoenix, you're already in a pretty dry environment. So you can kind of get away with not having a lot of air handling in there maybe. But if you're operating in a place that's already quite humid, you'll never get your equipment dry unless you either remove your clean, wet equipment out of that wash bay, or you have the ability to circulate the air in there and allow your equipment to dry. And that's probably the number one thing for keeping your processing equipment in good condition and extending the service life is keeping the equipment clean. That's the number one thing that you can do for it.
And just if I can tag on to there, the other thing that Kevin mentioned that I'm frankly shocked AJ didn't jump all over, hot water. You get some honey on your hands, you get something sticky, some tree sap or something. Are you washing your hands in cold water or hot water, my friend? You're washing it in hot water every time. And there's a reason for that. So again, it's shocking how many times we've been in facilities where their wash bay doesn't have hot running water. And so that's a big critical component to a real basic that gets overlooked all the time.
And I would just say, it's a great piece of equipment, and it's, the engineering is fantastic, but I tell my team after every use, you have to clean it to brand new condition. Just, you can't leave anything on it. And that's just, there's no getting around that. So.
Yes.
Preach.
I got one more question, and then we'll keep it moving. And this relates to these different configurations. So obviously, there is a variety of different ways you can kind of set this up: L shape, U shape, Z shape, Q shape, whatever. But the question is really, if you have all the space you need, is there one configuration over the others that is most advantageous?
From my standpoint, I like a nice straight line because it kind of, you're not sort of closing anything off. You can access everything nicely. I like a single line configuration where possible personally, but I've also been a part of L shape that worked fantastically. I haven't been part of a U shaped configuration, so I don't know if that creates sort of a cul-de-sac that what have you, but I suppose at the end of the day, you're going to have to fit into whatever facility you have, but yeah.
Some of that's going to be driven by whether or not you have a separate entrance and exit from the room. I mean, truly, if space and money were no object, you were just designing this from scratch, it would be amazing to have, your entrance on one end, everything in a line, and then your exit on the other end, so that, your product was flowing from greenhouse into your buffer space, into your bucking and trimming space, gets sorted, heads out the other end, and then heads into whatever your next processing or packaging step is. That would be an ideal world, just not always an option. So I think then it's about giving your people that are working in there the space to be able to lift a tote and turn around with it and move things around and not run into each other.
Excellent. Okay.
Okay, staffing. So we've actually already touched on a number of things that sort of dovetail with this. So when you're talking about automation, I think people know that a big driver for this is to reduce the number of staff that you need to have on hand. But you're never going to eliminate having staff altogether, or at least not with what's currently available with the technology on the market. You know, I can't speak for 20 years from now for the cannabis industry if you're going to be able to just have robots doing everything. But as of right now, you still need some humans. Jonathan, I'll ask you to advance the slide there. Thank you. So when we're looking at this, I think a different way to think about automation is not just about reducing the number of staff, but looking at the type of roles that you have driving your processing in a different way. So one of the points that we've made here on this slide is that, you know, everybody invests in having a master grower in charge of the growing operations. And that's a place where they're willing to spend big dollars and go out there and hunt down, you know, the best talent that they can get for the growing. But it seems like that's kind of ignored on the processing side of things. So my advice here is to kind of switch that mindset and think, if you've got a master grower, maybe you need a master processor as well. And then as you take a look at the team that you build around them, you're defining those roles. So no longer are you just looking for sort of that transient temporary labor that comes seasonally, and you know, you take somebody off the street and they're working in hour one at the same job as somebody who's working for you for 5 months, and they're doing the same function and have the same abilities. This gives you the opportunity to have a smaller staff, but very more interesting roles that people can progress through as they work with your organization. So this is going to achieve a few things for you. This will lead to lower staff turnover because these people are actually seeing for themselves a career path. They're developing some skills in that. They're also taking ownership of the equipment, which means that they're going to take better care of it. So, you know, you introduce them to how something works, how to take care of it. They're going to start to take ownership of that. As you work that up, you're going to get more efficient. So your throughputs on whatever the equipment is are going to go up. And then the quality of the product is going to improve. So if you take this approach, let's just say for your bucking and trimming operations with no automation, maybe you had a team of 50 people and they're all at that sort of minimum hourly wage. Maybe on automation, that team gets reduced to 10 people and they're not all on minimum wage, but you know you've got a consistent team that stays with you throughout. There may be, they're making more than minimum wage, but overall I think there's probably some savings there on labor, but you're gonna get it back in those other elements there, as I say, around much higher efficiency and higher quality end product. So just kind of tie this together with what we were talking about earlier though. So ergonomics comes into play here. So if you are investing in the equipment and you're investing in establishing these roles, you're investing in developing the personnel there with skills and expertise, you really need to make sure that they have a work environment where, you know, they're not hating their life when it comes to cleaning, for example. So I can tell you this, you could set up the best trim room possible, but if you make that same staff at the end of the day go and clean their trimming equipment in a back alley with cold water, after a couple of weeks, I would be surprised if those staff members stay with you. So that's going to be a key function here. You know, making sure that anybody who's on the QC line is comfortable. Now, believe me, I'm not a big believer in 8-hour work days or vacations. I prefer 16-hour work days and 0 vacation days. So I believe in work, but I think you're going to work harder if you're comfortable and feeling productive in your work. Kevin, some thoughts on sort of how you approach staffing at your facility?
It's hard. I think, you know, I think the people aspect of this is probably the most difficult. The Mobius is, It's a good point to talk about, because the Mobius is a challenge, because you're handing basically a high performance vehicle to your trim crew, and a lot of the times these are more kind of remedial workers that aren't equipped to handle this type of product, and so. So that took a little while to get through. And to be honest, I really, for a long period of time, only trusted myself or my kind of maintenance guy, my buildings maintenance guy with the machine, because he knew, how to treat things right. And we ended up converting our lead extractor over to our post-processing manager, because he really knew how to care for, type 7 butane extraction equipment. And there's a big correlation between that type of equipment and what we're dealing with the Mobius on a daily basis. And then obviously the whole process of post-processing and the organizational piece of it. But yeah, I think getting someone who is, maybe that higher paid person and getting your staff, a little to a level up maybe is a good idea. With this equipment, you're going to end up saving so much anyway. It's not going to matter. And I had a kid try to put a screwdriver in my tumbler, and because he got the little nub stuck, and luckily we caught him before he caused any damage. But that's the kind of stuff that happens. And so and at the end of the day, that kid can not come back to work the next day because he's embarrassed or whatever, and I got to deal with this problem. So
would this be a good point for a question or two, or
yes.
Sure.
Yeah.
I just have one, because I know we're up against the time here, and that was from Sue, and she asked a really good question. The idea of this master processor or something similar, what industries could you find somebody like that other than cannabis? And what kind of person is that? Is that somebody that has a lot of years of experience? I mean, what would you look for that position?
Yeah, well, one of my observations I've made here in the Canadian licensed producer market. So I think anybody who's attending this webinar right now from the US, you're well aware that Canada, they recreational legalization of cannabis sort of created this big industry, and there was a lot of investment. So in Canada, cannabis is very much looked upon like the food and pharmaceutical industry. So we have found ourselves over the last few years dealing with a lot of people that have actually come over from food and pharmaceutical. So in Ontario and Canada, that's the big manufacturing location. There were people that came over from the dairy production plant. They do a lot of cookies and crackers. We have people that came over from agricultural processing. So that'd be more like your hothouse tomatoes, peppers, cucumbers, things like that. We have had some people that have come over from the medical industry. And so I'm a little bit caught off guard. I'm sorry, I don't have their professional designations off the top of my head. I'll go and look that up. I know that there isn't anything that exists specific to the cannabis industry right now. It's just not mature enough to have that. But that's where I would sort of draw the parallel. Food and pharmaceutical manufacturing is where you're going to be looking for that type of player.
And in addition to that, I mean, just like any business, have a look at the staff you're already paying and see who's keenly interested to learn more and genuinely takes ownership of their current daily tasks and that kind of thing, and maybe just to prod and needle them a little bit on what their future intentions are, etc. And you might find a real diamond in the rough just right there in your processing plant already.
Excellent. I think we can just move on to the next section.
Perfect. Okay, so how do we start with automation? So everybody's going to have a different reason to get involved in automation, and the question, is legitimately going to come up. Where do I start? Am I going to start with a bucker? Am I going to start with a trimmer? Am I going to start with a sorter, a mill, a rosin press, whatever it is? So I think that it's the important first step here is to identify your end product. So if your end product is top shelf smokable flower, then the equipment that you're focused on is going to be quite a bit different from if your primary finished product is pre-rolls. So, I mean, if your primary finished product is pre-rolls, you're going to want a great mill to give you a consistent product that can go into your pre-roll machine and offer your potential clientele a superior product. So that's going to be, if I'm doing pre-rolls, my number one concern is going to be what kind of mill can I buy that's going to deliver what I need.
And you only need a quick trim because you don't need
a quick trim. Exactly. So then that's a little bit of a different consideration. So that's the first thing. Identify what it is that your end product is, and then whatever makes sense to be your first machine purchase there. Then that's the one you want to go with. So work with your suppliers, with the manufacturers out there. Ask the questions. What can I expect? What results can I expect, etc. And then vet things for yourself and make a confident decision. Choose equipment that's most suitable to your processing style. So, the big one that comes up all the time, we did a webinar a couple months back on wet versus dry processing. So do you do wet? Do you do dry? Do you do both? Semi-dry, I believe, was Eric Singleton's
term for it
back in the last webinar. And James Knox chimed in with, he believes that each growing site should use all of those methods, depending on time of day, time of year, et cetera, et cetera. So choose the equipment that's going to satisfy what it is, your own processing methodologies. And that really goes hand in glove with the next point as well. The one that's going to give you the biggest bang for the buck. Analyze what sort of throughputs you need, what sort of quality you need, manage your expectations accordingly, and select the machinery that's going to give you the best value. And the best value is not always the lowest price. Value is equated to, a number of different metrics go into value. But the example I've used in the past in our milling webinar is, if price is the determinant in best value, then you're going to go to Walmart and buy a Cuisinart food processor to do your pre-rolls. But that's clearly not the best value because you're not getting product consistency, volumes, blah, 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 blah. So that's the bang for the buck thing really has to be a thought out equation, a balance of pros and cons on the dollar side of the ledger and the results side of the ledger. And then keep in mind that you can always start with one piece of equipment and map out your progress. Just like, if you might have a 90-day rolling business plan or the 1-year projection, 3-year projection, et cetera. Map out which piece makes sense to go to next and be prepared to change your mind. If you say, day 1, I'm going to need a trimmer, day 2, I'm going to need a bucker, and day 3 or year 1, year 2, year 3, I'm going to need a sorter. And then you discover that, a higher priority for me right now is a sorter versus a bucker. I'm only saving X amount of man hours on a bucker, but I'm going to sort of save Y amount of hours on a sorter. Be prepared to challenge yourself as to your own decision making a few months ago and roll with the punches and add the pieces of the puzzle that make the most sense after you've sort of got your feet wet and know where you're headed.
And I think conveyors are a big part of that equation there, where it makes sense because it's going to make the feeding of a particular machine more efficient versus a nice to have to move material from one station to the next. Oftentimes the one station to the next move might be a luxury, particularly in a farm type environment, where it's maybe just as easy to manually throw a bunch of those totes onto a cart and take them over to the next station, and not deal with the initial expense and then hassles of maintaining a conveyor there. That's an example of where maybe that's a nice to have down the road. Back to you, Jonathan.
Sure. I mean, I would ask Kevin the question, but he answered it right out of the get-go. He, the first call was for a trimmer, and then move on from there. So in Kevin's instance, that was what was priority number 1, and that's sort of where he got his first step in there. I don't want to put words in your mouth, Kevin, but I think that one's basically asked and answered.
Yep.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So while we're at it, did you find that you had to change direction at all in where you thought your automation was going? Like you mentioned the sorter, did you know from the get-go, hey, I'm going to need a sorter, or did that sort of reveal itself as time went on?
I knew I was going to need one. I just really prioritized what we were going to need. And so we ended up going with the trimmer first, and then in preparation for the amount of product we were going to have coming down on a consistent basis, and my need to get the product off the stem as fast as possible, the buckers were really our next line item that we wanted to get fulfilled. And the last being the sorting.
Right on. Cool. Well, I think that wraps our presentation portion here. Just questions from the field now, Jonathan?
Yeah, actually, you guys have been doing a great job of answering the questions that came up as we went through the presentation. Nice comment from Matthew. He says, "You all are awesome."
Oh, thanks, Matthew.
Thanks, Matthew.
I
I always really liked Matthew.
I always liked Matthew too. Good name. He's a straight shooter. Well, I think that's about it. Unless there's any sort of final thoughts from you, Kevin, or from you, Brett or AJ.
Kevin, you take it away if you have any final thoughts there, my friend.
I would just say whoever's listening that hasn't bought the product, go buy the product. Stop wasting time. It's there's nothing better out there. And I'm telling you this because it makes my life easier. I'm going to continue to buy the products. Of the cannabis space, I would say that post-processing, this is the best thing out there. I found my lighting company that I feel works, and you guys, you're really on the level of a Tesla or an Apple of the industry. And so it's just kudos to you guys. Keep it up because you're really helping us out.
I very much appreciate it, Kevin. Thank you.
Yeah, and again, I can't overstate it. I don't know when's the last time Kevin and I spoke before yesterday, probably 8 months or something like that. And got a call from Kevin yesterday morning, and then followed it up with a call yesterday afternoon saying, "Hey,
can you fill us out?
This is a total oddball, but any chance you could join a webinar tomorrow? We just ran into a hiccup." And so thanks a million for stepping up, Kevin. It was like totally out of the blue and left field, and super appreciate you joining us today and your insights.
You bet.
Well, I think that should just about do it. I just want to thank everybody for attending. Big thanks to you again, Kevin, for stepping at the last second. We will have lots more webinars to come. So if there's any other topics that you'd really like to see, please just send us an email and let us know, info@mobiustrimmer.com. One more final reminder, Demo in the Desert 3 coming up in October. So look to your inbox for more details on that. Other than that, I hope everybody has a great day. Feel free to reach out with any questions. Brett and AJ also monitor that same inbox, info@mobiustrimmer.com. Kevin, if somebody wants to say hi to you, what's the best way to do that?
You can probably reach out to me at LinkedIn, Kevin Ahasy on LinkedIn. It's AHAESY.
Okay, awesome. Any other last thoughts from you guys, Brett or AJ?
Just on Demo in the Desert. Demo in the Desert 2 was awesome. Really great, fun time. Thanks for everybody who joined us there. And you can check out Demo in the Desert 3 at demointhedesert.com.
That's true.
Sounds good. All right. Thanks again, everybody. Have a great afternoon.